Hey everyone, welcome to the next exciting episode of the Liquid Weekly podcast. I am your host, Karl, along with my wonderfully dressed co host, Taylor Page. Both of us located somewhere here in Central Ohio and excited to talk today about all things Shopify development. Taylor, what's been going on, man? The end of February, life's looking up,
End of
sun's out.
February? Yes, like life is up, sun is out. That's the biggest thing I think. Just like we've had a couple of weeks where it's been, I think we've had more sunshine in the past 2 weeks than we've had in the
Yeah,
past 3 months, and that's just insane to think about
it's
sometimes.
wonderful.
But yeah, it's nice. It's weird when you're like, I miss the sun. So, but yeah, like it's been nice. A couple of nice days. I don't know if y'all have been able to get outside some, but we've even had days in like mid 50s, and so that was like really nice. And so hopefully we get more of that. The groundhog did not see its shadow, so it's
That's right.
it's so fun. I wouldn't even know that, but my daughter got super excited. Like she learned about this at school, and then she came home and was like, "We need to watch like Punxsutawney Phil." Is that what? I don't even know how to say it.
Yeah, that's his
Uh,
name.
yeah, and so I was like, okay, we don't usually watch TV before school, but like this is a thing or whatever. And so threw it on the TV, and then of course, like it's the only place you can find is like the news, and so like I'm like watching this while I'm trying to make breakfast, like in the corner of my eye, because like I have to like change the channel every now and again for these random news segments that are like not
Right.
appropriate for children. Like why? So. But it came on and she was super excited, and so I got to watch the groundhog not see its shadow, and people a lot of dancing and stuff. So that was interesting.
Now, have you
Uh,
seen the movie?
Groundhog Day.
Yeah, with Bill Murray?
Uh, I have not ever
Ooh.
actually watched the movie.
Taylor, okay. Well, it's
I
a
need to
good
watch it.
movie.
It's the premise though is it's like it keeps happening over and over, right?
This
Like the day.
man, he travels to the city to do this little, he's a weather forecaster, and he gets stuck there because of a winter storm, and he
Mhm.
ends up spending the night against his wishes in this little podunk town that he hates. And then he wakes up the next morning and it's exactly the same day as before, and it just keeps repeating.
No,
But it's, well, I won't spoil it. Obviously, everyone's seen it at this point, but you haven't. I will say this
except for
though, I
me.
brought it up because here, I think they still do this, I'm not for sure. There's a movie theater by the OSU campus where they show that movie on a
Oh, nice.
24-hour marathon. And if you stick it out for all 24 hours, I think you win some kind of prize at the end. And so people do this. They will go,
That's
they'll watch the
awesome.
movie over and over again for a whole day just to say they've done it. Yeah, it's crazy.
What? That's hilarious. The
So,
things people will do. After I saw on ESPN one day a rock paper scissors
yeah, really?
merit or yeah, like a championship or whatever, I was like, all right, like we're everything can be gamified, right? Like,
Peak society. Yeah, we're done.
yes.
How's the
Uh,
family? Everyone healthy?
yeah, man. My son just had a ear infection, but it's
Oof.
it's one of those. He's when I talk to other people, I don't know if y'all have this. Like, there's always like one kid that like he's the kid that gets sick, or she's the girl that gets sick, or whatever, and the other one's always healthy or whatever. And so my son has been that for us. Like he's the one he's constantly got ear infections. We could never
Mm.
tell when he was younger, except for that his behavior would change like really radically, right? Like he'd get just like angry, and yelly about stuff, and you're like, "What's going on with you, man?" And it was because ear infection. So at least now that he's older, like he can tell us, which is nice. But um, he hasn't had one in a really long time, and he ended up having one. So other than that, though, that's an easy enough antibiotic deal. And they make medicine taste really good now. So like he would like just show up and be like, "Hey, it's time for my medicine." Like I would forget it, he would remember because it's like this bubble gum something or other, and so he would remind me like,
Sure.
"I need my medicine, like give it to me." So that's nice. At least it's not a fight or whatever. But yeah, everybody else. My wife came down with something a little bit too, but um, you know, real quick bounce back kind of type thing. So I think it's just probably changing seasons, kind of weird limbo state we're in right now with the weather.
Yeah.
How about y'all? Like everybody happy, healthy, and enjoying that sunshine?
Yeah, for the most part, I haven't had any major illnesses. I have noticed the last, I don't know, 3 or 4 months, I've been getting more like sinus kind of headaches. I think they're
Yeah.
sinus headaches. And so I'm starting to do like those sinus rinse things now. I just bought a cheapo one off
Oh yeah.
Amazon, and that's really unpleasant, but I'm
Yeah,
hoping
I
it
would say my
helps.
wife does
I
that. I just
was
nope.
like,
So
no.
if you my 2 cents, the thing that works for me anytime I'm starting to feel that or under the weather at all, and the stuff is brutal because I hate sour. Apple cider vinegar, 2 tablespoons of it 3 times a day, and that will clean you right out. Any of that stuff or whatever, like it's just gone or whatever. So anytime I start to get sick, I start hitting that stuff hard.
So you just swallow it?
Yeah, it's bad.
How's
It's
how's that
it's
help your sinuses?
I don't know. It just clears everything out. Like if
Can you
you've
just
got
smell it? It seems like that would be enough, but
you would think, but and like I said, I am so like I won't even eat like candy that's sour. Like I hate sour so much. And
oh,
so I have found if you chase it with purple Powerade, that's the ticket right there. Like red is rain. So that's my recommendation. If it gets bad enough and you don't want to do the weird rinse thing, apple cider
all
vinegar,
right.
man.
Well, I'm
Yeah.
between it's sinuses or maybe my pillow because I think it could be
Mm.
like muscle tension back here too. So I don't know. Just don't get old because that's the moral of the story.
Yeah, it's bad. Well, that's getting old. I don't know, mid 30s or whatever. I've hurt my back pretty bad before. I tweaked it last week, and so I took pretty much a week off, and I do all these stretches, because like I said, several years ago, I hurt my back real bad. Went to PT for months, and so it hasn't really been a problem. And I just moved wrong on a warm up, um, and so I've just kind of switching back to like what I'm doing at least because I don't want to hurt myself. Hurting your
No.
back is rough. It makes everything terrible.
Yes, it sure does.
Hmm.
Well, I suppose our two listeners are probably tired of listening to us yammer around about health problems for 6 minutes. What's going on in
Yeah.
like work life? People
Work
could care less
life.
about our families, although I care about your family. But yeah, what are you
Yeah.
doing that's like Shopify related? Anything interesting?
Yeah,
I know we're
sure.
gonna jump
So,
into a topic here in a little bit, but anything?
hmm yeah, just launched like a smaller store. So I work primarily with a handful of like plus shops like on the regular, but then I do, a couple smaller things like redesigns or builds or whatever. I'll
Right.
take on a couple of those in addition to that. And so we got to launch one that was actually kind of fun. I got to do kind of like a uh, newer for me, but used meta objects for this bundler. So we assigned all these products um, with meta objects or whatever. So meta field assignment with meta objects and stuff like that. And so every single variant that was anything with variants is always just like such a pain to deal with. And so when
Yep.
you change the variant or whatever, it's going to surface these related items. And so it was a fencing company. And so when like related posts to this, people buy these fencing panels, so you don't want them buying like the wrong kind based on like the height and width and stuff that they selected, and so it surfaces just the ones that are related to that specific variant. So that was a lot of fun. That was a little bit more unique of a thing than I've got to do with a
Now,
bundler.
did you get to like architect that as well? Like you talk about how you approach
Yeah,
it with meta objects and stuff. Typically in your work, does someone hand you like the spec, or do you actually get to come up with how to implement it?
usually I get to, which is
That's fun.
nice.
Yeah.
Yes, especially on these like that are from the ground up builds. So this was like an established company that they've got a brick and mortar and they've been selling in person for a long time, but they now want to be able to make it easier for folks to do this online. And
Yeah.
which makes sense, right? You're trying to reduce your admin of like having to like hop on a call, give quotes, or whatever. Someone can just build a cart, and call it a day. And so figuring out like the shipping and all this other stuff for them with their local pickup and delivery, that was a whole deal. But the storefront stuff, like that was exciting to work with. And yeah, like at least for those kinds of jobs, it's more like, hey, like this is what we want, and then
Yeah.
I get to say, okay, great, like this is how we achieve that. And then the nice thing about meta objects is you get to shape exactly what that ends up looking like. And so getting more comfortable now with being able to actually like reference that,
Yeah.
in code. Like we've talked like months ago with Trudy, about how like it got to the point where I'm just appending like dot value to everything, trying to get this to finally surface. And so I'm
Right.
kind of getting the hang of it a lot better now. And so that was fun. It's nice when you get to do these builds, even when it's like a smaller build. It wasn't like a big, like huge gig or anything like that, but it was nice to get to do that.
Well, it's even nicer, and you didn't call this out, so I'm going to call it out for you. Is I don't know how you feel, but I feel like sometimes it's like, man, please don't send me another fashion brand or another tea or beverage brand or another whatever, right? To fencing. That's interesting.
Yep.
That's something
Yeah,
new. That's unique.
yeah, yep. I've never worked in it and learned a lot more about fencing than I ever thought that I would. There's apparently a
Yeah.
lot to know about that stuff. And so but yeah, exactly. It was nice. And it's always nice to work with an established business. Yeah, instead of I have this idea and we're trying to crank something out real fast and
Yeah.
we don't get the time to approach it thoughtfully. So but yes, always fun to kind of work in another space for
One of the most
sure. How
interesting offshoot ones I've done is it was I think they sold like the sand that you brush on the patios, like when you go to interlock like your papers, like the last step is always to put in like
Oh,
the
okay. That's
that certain
cool.
standard. There's a whole like world about that apparently I was
Yeah.
unfamiliar with. So
Right. It's really interesting, like all these like really deep like niches that you can get into,
hmm
niches that you can get into. That was I was talking to another app dev about that. Is I think that's the next progression, right, in Shopify apps because there's so many, but I
yeah.
think there's so many of these like that are completely underserved. Where if you could do something just for this specific niche, I think you could do pretty well.
Yeah, not to go way off course there, but that almost begs the question of at that point, in terms of specificity, are you better served doing it through the App Store or as a private
Mm,
app for select clients? Because there's so few of them, and then you'd have to charge so much money for the app to ever be worth it. You know what I mean?
true. True. Yeah.
That's anyway, it's a conversation for another day, I suppose.
Right, right. Yeah. Yeah. How about you? What kind of Shopify things have you been wrangling? You're kind of in the topic for today a little bit, so not to give
Yeah,
away too much of the secret sauce or whatever.
no, there's no
Good
sauce
lead in
here. I
though.
typically avoid sauces, lots of sugar in sauces. So I have been working on a new migration project that landed on my desk, which has been interesting. I
Oh,
did a big one over
from
the
where?
summer. Like, where did it come from?
Yeah,
My
well, I'm assuming migrating to Shopify, I should
yeah. Oh,
say.
right, right,
So
right. Yeah.
where?
Sorry.
So
From
from?
WooCommerce into
Oh, okay.
Shopify.
Nice.
So my last one I had done was BigCommerce.
Right.
So now we're doing WooCommerce. Still using Matrixify as the primary tool to
For
facilitate
sure.
that. The nice thing this time around is WooCommerce has much better support via Matrixify for pulling in data via the API out of WooCommerce.
Yeah.
And it just mostly worked this time, which I was very excited about. The thing I was
Well,
not excited about was similar to last time, you still get a bunch of failed imports, and
mhm.
often it's related to like weirdness with the phone number, or like there's a customer in place already and it chokes on the import of additional records because it can't handle that for some reason. So there's still a fair bit of like manual wrangling in terms of finding those failed files or
Mhm.
failed imports, and then you at first you're like, oh, I'm going to fix this data, and then I'll make it right, and it quickly realize there's just no fixing this. Like I just have to remove it. So usually it ends up just deleting the telephone numbers, like and re-importing it. Like this will be
Mhm.
fine. All everything. No one's going to call this person. So we're getting there.
Right. Yeah.
Plus the number's not
Well,
even valid anyway. So
yeah, well, and if they're not leveraging it for SMS or whatever, like, at least in Shopify too, when it comes
right.
back through, if they need it to like follow up on an order, they're going to give you like the most up to date one anyhow or whatever. So
Yep.
for the most part, not a huge deal. It is weird that there's not like a really standard format for that, right? Like there's
Well,
there's
there's
so
a
many
standard
different
format
ways.
for it.
Is there?
There is but for whatever reason, a lot of these tools, I doubt it's Matrixify. I'm assuming it's WooCommerce in this case, and previously it was BigCommerce.
Hmm.
Somehow the phone data just gets messed up.
Hmm.
I'm not gonna lose sleep over that one. But the other thing I've been working on, and this will segue us into our main topic for today, is a lot of these shops that I've worked with are Plus stores, and a lot of what I've done is Shopify Scripts and the script editor because I'm a Rubyist at heart, and so I love doing that, and it's always fun, even with the limitations that you encounter. But obviously, we know that the future there is checkout extensions, and
Yeah.
so I've been diving into that and slowly replacing scripts with checkout extensions. It's kind of fun because especially if you've used the script generator, like there's a free tool out there that I forget the gentleman's name and put it together, but it's a wonderful tool, but the code is
Yeah.
just very verbose because of the way it has to be, right? It's very generic,
Sure.
so you can configure it to be able to take something like that, which is hundreds of lines potentially, and like bring it down into a checkout extension where the function itself is like maybe 20 lines, 25 lines, is really
Yeah.
gratifying. So um
It's
you've been
always
doing a
nice to
lot with
see that,
checkout
huh?
extensions too, so
Yeah,
we
yeah,
want to
yeah.
go deep into that today. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think because there's a lot of when you talk to people about checkout extensions, checkout extensibility, I think that there's a lot of confusion still around the
Yeah.
terms, right? Like, and even I feel like I was covering some of the resources associated with this, and I was still like, oh, okay, like I guess this is actually the proper terminology for this. So,
Yep.
because yeah, so to start, as far as like understanding things how they go. So checkout extensibility, I thought was practically synonymous with checkout extensions, but checkout extensibility is the much more broader topic, right? versus checkout extensions specifically are dealing with some of those other things we were previously, using checkout.liquid to customize the checkout. So I thought that was really interesting. But as far as resources, I won't do a whole lot of like screen sharing or anything like that, but we'll link up a bunch of stuff in show notes. One thing that I did find helpful that has been something I've ignored previously. I don't know if you like dig too much into this, but in your Shopify partner dashboard, there is actually a whole section on product docs dedicated to checkout. And
Oh,
so there's actually quite a few really decent resources in there that link you to checkout extension stuff, which is pretty neat. So, like I said, I was kind of like digging into that a little bit and learning a little bit more about probably how to talk about this stuff a little bit better. Some of these things have progressed too. So like the branding API before was kind of like early preview, and now it's not. So for people that want to, customize colors and different things like that or whatever, make sure everything's on brand there.
yeah.
Custom fonts, that's one I need to revisit. I've had that on my back burner for a while that I still need to hit. But being able to do that stuff at checkout is something that I think people are gonna like doing. The more stuff that they can do to customize their brand.
And just to circle back, we talk about extensibility. It's not just checkout, right? If I
Mhm.
remember correctly, there's other places within Shopify now where they're using the extensibility concept to allow you to interject behavior, interject UI elements.
Yeah. So yeah, extensibility seems like is this like broader concept in Shopify right now that they're moving towards. So the one that moved into like early developer preview was the customer account extensibility.
Mm-hmm.
So that's currently in developer preview, but for folks that are on new accounts, those customer accounts, they've got it's pretty. I don't know if you've played around with it too much or what have you, but if you want to customize checkout at all, or not checkout, I'm sorry, but your customer accounts, you don't want the new customer accounts right now. You really want to stick to the classic customer accounts. So customizations in customer accounts could be anything from the branding, and those sorts of things to anything that you want that's just not commonplace, right? And so because it is just like this Shopify URL, even they've only recently opened up to where you could throw it on a subdomain for like,
Right.
accounts dot whatever your brand domain is, and so that's all pretty new, but that is where that's kind of moving towards, it seems, which is good and bad. For me as a front end dev, I'm like, ah, man, like I got to start learning more app dev because everything is moving that way
Yeah.
when it comes to that. So, but yeah, extensibility too. If we're talking about checkout extensibility, I didn't realize like functions kind of fell under that umbrella. I always thought of functions as something separate from checkout extensions because I did extensibility and extensions were synonymous. But extensibility is just this big broad topic, and
Right.
so when we're talking about checkout extensibility, that includes checkout extensions and Shopify functions, which I thought was interesting.
That is interesting. And just to circle back real quick to that point about it being a broader concept within Shopify, not just related to checkouts now, I can understand your frustration about having to move more into the app
Mm-hmm.
space as a UI dev. But on the other hand, the fact that it's going to be sort of this consistent tool chain in terms of how you actually stand these up and interact with them and install them in the store, I think that really will make life a lot easier for us because instead of having to, depending on what you're doing, like tweak this particular theme file or mess around with these settings and this, theme thing, whatever, it's all going to be the same workflow, the same tool chain, and it could make life a lot simpler for us. So,
Yeah, that's totally accurate. For a couple of these folks that I've done checkout extensions for, so in we'll talk about this a little bit, but like in on Plus Shops, they have the ability for these extensions only checkout extensions, right? And so
hmm
it's an app, but it's all hosted by Shopify. You just push it up and stuff like that or whatever. Really, really nice because then I, as again, like a front end dev, is like I'm not having to figure out how to like host this app and all this other stuff, but your checkout extensions are hosted by Shopify, even if you've got an app or whatever. Like once the merchant pushes it up to their store or whatever, like that's where it's being hosted. And so that's kind of the cool thing about that aspect. But the nice thing of that is, honestly, I have found like some things are easier to deal with in checkout.liquid just because of that consistency. Now some things like are a little bit more closed off. Like there's just some things you can't do the same as you used to be able to do with checkout.liquid. because like the DOM manipulation there isn't the same,
Right.
right? Because it's not there, right? Like you're only able to do like these specific things, but that's good and bad. Bad where some folks will see that as a little bit of regression. Good in the sense that I can more accurately tell, the merchant client, hey, like this is going to work more consistently, but like this is out of bounds now, and we can't actually do that. But this will work. So I have good alternatives to offer. The other big thing is it just being available in Shop. So as Shop becomes more popular, if people choose Shop Pay, checkout.liquid customizations didn't exist, right? Versus now you can actually extend those there, which is really really neat, especially in that pre checkout phase. But I mentioned functions. The other cool thing that I didn't really realize actually was pixels. The new under customer events,
Oh,
uh, pixels are actually considered part of checkout extensibility because of how those are being handled. So that's kind of interesting as well. I've done a little bit of
so
pixel work there.
yeah, tell me about the implications of that. I have not done anything with pixels, to be honest. So,
Yeah, so Shopify basically has done this. So, everybody wants to run all these different pixels and checkout and everything else. And so we were dumping a lot of stuff right into checkout.liquid, right, for tracking scripts and stuff like that as well, just because people, they want to use these other things to help track stuff like that. And that's totally understandable because, they don't think the data is like as clean as it should be from Shopify, whatever, I don't know.
right.
Other people are probably way smarter about that from the analytics side than I am. However, once we move to checkout extensibility, right, like you can't just drop a random script in there. And so Shopify had to build something in to make that a reality. And so we can do things like, Google Tag Manager. If you've got that running, you can set up a custom pixel in order to do that in customer events. And it has a series of like predefined events and data that you can send back, which has been really helpful for some folks. So that I've worked with lately.
It's pretty nifty.
It is, yeah. It's obviously more limited, but than just like the straight up what we used to be able to do before. But I feel like because it is in pixels, I know early on there were concerns about them not being consistent enough. They're sandboxed, and so you might actually be better. I don't totally understand that concept where we can't actually do a couple of things. Like in Google Tag Manager, you have this nice little option where you can like preview like the tag to make sure it's firing correctly. But because of the nature of the pixels, like once you hit checkout, the preview doesn't work anymore. We can't actually confirm that the pixels are firing properly. So we actually have to go back and see like where is this data supposed to be surfaced. So if we're passing this information along to what's the most recent one was the Reddit pixel. If whatever, like we would need to make sure like data is actually passing through on that end. And so that's been interesting from that perspective. But
Now,
getting
do
into
you remember sort of the oh, what's the word I'm looking for? I can't remember the word I'm looking for, but do you remember the history of the term pixel?
no, tell me more.
So I'm making sure my memory is correct, but people feel free to write in and correct me if I'm wrong. But way back in the early days of web development, when I was involved, it was common to want to track what people were doing on the site somehow, right? And this is before all the tools we have today, or even before, might have been before Google Analytics. And so what we used to do is we would embed a transparent image that was 1 pixel in size on the
Mm-hmm.
website, and then you could add URL parameters to that, right? And so what would happen is when the page was loaded by a user, it would make a request for that image. The user would never see the image. The image would load instantly because it was just a 1 pixel in size, but it would hit your server, and so you could log that interaction and get the data that you needed that way.
That's super interesting. I had no idea that that's where that came from or what the
I'm
origins were from
assuming
that
that's
at
why they
all.
still
I've
call them pixels
never
today, because it's the same thing.
I don't
Yeah,
know. Pixels have been around since I've been in web dev. You gotta remember I was a social worker for a long time before I got to do this. So
right.
I don't have all the early war stories of like remember how terrible this used to be. Like honestly, the web's been pretty good since I've been involved for the most part. Like I was, you know, I was coming
Yeah,
on with I've had Flex like for as long as I've known how to use it, and I've had Grid. Well, Grid came later, but um, and I love Grid now, but like from
I
CSS or
still think
whatever. So
all you need are tables. That's really all you
no,
need.
get out of here,
We were
man.
doing so
Stop
much
it.
with just tables. No, just kidding.
Stop it.
I'll get up my
uh,
old man soapbox here, but I do worry sometimes about people, especially newer web developers, that see the state of the web as it is, learn to
Hmm.
be proficient in that and don't realize what it was before all the commercialization, all the tracking, all the stuff we're doing. Clearly, there's a business purpose to it, but it also makes me sad sometimes to think about where things went. And they didn't have to go this way, but corporations got involved, and here we are. So,
Here we
end
are.
of
Yeah.
soapbox rant. Okay,
So I'm gonna pivot to something not related
thank
to
you.
that. So in addition to being able to check out extensibility with extensions only apps, obviously the pixels. We talked a little bit about functions, branding API, all this fun stuff or whatever. You've obviously got public apps, and so um, that you can do that. And so Shopify actually, I did double check the amount of public apps that are specifically for checkout extensibility, like customizing checkout. It's actually really small. So for
Right.
folks who are interested in building for Shopify, this is like very low competition territory kind of type thing. Obviously, you have to like, you know, produce something that like works really, really well, or comes in at maybe a better price point or whatever. Because there's a handful of people that just it seems like they're really like nailing that. So like Gil Greenberg, for instance, with checkout blocks, he
Mm-hmm.
has he's been in that space from the very beginning. I think Shopify first brought him on. What was that? When they were doing the initial talks about like checkout
Yep.
extensions and stuff like that. And so he's obviously like done a lot of cool stuff. It seems like he's having a lot of really great success there. And so he's a solid follow if people aren't following him, just because he has really good insights about that. Um, but that is to say that the number of people, I think there are 2 pages I looked on the App Store to where it linked out for checkout, custom apps to customize Shopify checkout, and there are 2 pages like of
Yeah.
apps. There
I
are
was super
32
surprised by
apps
that too.
listed. Mm-hmm.
I just assumed once people realize what this was, that it would be like the floodgates have opened, and so it's like I'm not even gonna bother trying to get in there because I don't have the time to really do it quickly. But yeah, you're right. It's
Mm-hmm.
been a surprisingly small number of folks have taken advantage of it.
Yep. And as far as like just generating an extension like for an existing app, it feels like there's a lot of those that could be doing something that simple. Like here's just an easy way to surface, like you do, we had Henry on not too long ago, like an easy way to, work with gift cards. Like, okay, like make it super easy to just like add a little block to like, oh, you want a gift card kind of type thing. Like just add a checkout
Right.
extension for that, Like again, like it's a very shallow pool as far as compared to the rest of the app store. Maybe where you could wade in there and get some stuff done.
I'm glad you said wade in there because normally you don't want to dive into a shallow pool, right?
Right, right.
Because
It's,
you
I
could
I
get
chose that
hurt.
carefully. I
But
chose that
the
carefully.
wading
Yeah.
in would be the appropriate thing. Yeah.
Yes. Carefully enter the the waters. So we'll link up to a couple of things here, but as far as like checkout extensions, we talked a little bit about extensibility, kind of like this broad topic of like all the different things that it does include. And so the other thing that I wanted to call out, we talked about checkout and stuff like that or whatever, but there's this idea of different stages of
Hmm.
checkout extensibility as well. I think most of us, what we think of checkout extensions and those sorts of things, at least me, I always think of what they refer to as actually the pre-purchase stage. So
Right.
right before like we've actually spent any money, right? Kind of type thing. Now there are also additional stages as well. And so there's a little bit more of a migration piece going on with that still, right? As far as that goes. And so if you are kind of paying attention to checkout extensibility and all this other stuff and you're working in shops, the migration to that for the most part, I'm still only running into a handful of folks that are still on checkout.liquid, at least folks that I'm working with and those sorts of things. So our checkout has been updated, and the thank you and order status page though has a lot of additional implications as well for that. And so a lot of folks to uh, in your side, I'm sure, like if we can talk a little bit about like the scripts and stuff like that that we're looking at and moving to functions. But even we touched on this a little bit, like the pixels, like because we don't have checkout.liquid, we don't have tracking scripts, so people are using that thank you. If you're in the checkout, you scroll down to the bottom, you've got extra scripts that you can add for like order tracking and stuff like that. So when you transition to the thank you and order status, checkout extensibility, like that goes away. And so you do have to rely then on pixels in order to accomplish whatever you were doing there previously. And the
Sure.
difference being you have to subscribe to individual events
Hmm.
in that. So you can't just drop this pixel in there and capture literally everything, right? Like gone are the opportunities to try to like, do whatever you were doing previously.
Right.
You got like specific events that you can say, hey, like when this event happens, fire and send off this information to wherever it needs to go, kind of type thing. And so that has been interesting to work with in that regard. I actually had to roll one store back because we had we got the go ahead from the main third party we were working with, that we were like, yeah, like go ahead, like roll out thank you and order status pages now that we've got this going.
Right.
And a week later, like the people running the ads were like, hey, like no, we need you to roll that back. And so thankfully
Oh,
you can roll it back. And I think thank you and order status, we have a further out deprecation for that, August 2025, I think, versus checkout.liquid deprecation for 2024 here.
gotcha. Well, that's good that you're able to recover from that, because I know sometimes it's a one-way street, but it's nice you can go back. You can always go home.
Yeah, that was the only reason why we were okay with doing it in the first place, because I was like, well, we can roll it back if we have to, so let's just go ahead and do it, and then if we see that there are issues, let's roll it back. And so that we did just end up having to roll it back. So thank you to the very smart people at Shopify who built in the ability to roll it back, for people like me that didn't think to check with every single other cook in the kitchen, so to speak.
So to speak. So you touched on another thing a moment ago, which was the idea of what are people doing about Shopify functions, I'm sorry, Shopify scripts,
Hmm.
and needing to bring those over into functions.
Yeah. So I don't know if you can touch on that a little bit more. So because I don't honestly, when I have a scripts question, I call you. If I can't get something done, in the free tool that we referenced earlier,
Yeah.
that helped kind of like generate the scripts that you would need, which was really good for a lot of use cases, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I stay away from a lot of that stuff otherwise. But um, yeah. So what are you doing to kind of call some of that stuff out?
Yeah, so obviously this is going to be a big need for Plus stores that have existing scripts. I
Mhm.
think the deprecation date got bumped. I can't remember what it is right now for Shopify
That's
Script Editor.
That's
Is it?
August 2025.
Oh, it's
Mm-hmm.
okay. So you get over a year yet, which kind of takes the urgency away to some extent.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it's good to be thinking about that, because that certainly is where the future is going, supposedly. Um,
Mm-hmm.
the trouble is, because it's a completely different tech stack, right? We're going from Ruby scripts that handle either line items, shipping, or discounts to checkout extensions slash functions and replicating that behavior. So there is a bit of translation that needs to happen. And so I think the
Mm-hmm.
biggest challenge here is going to be for folks that don't have a solid programming background. Maybe they were like using that tool to generate the scripts, or maybe they learned just enough Ruby to kind of get it done, because it doesn't take a lot to do the things
Right.
you need to do. So now suddenly they're faced with this whole new world of how do you stand up a Shopify function? How do you use a CLI tool? How do you code in JavaScript or TypeScript or potentially even React, depending on what you end up wanting to do.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so just for folks to realize there's a bit more of a lift there if you're not a developer. Even if you are a developer, like my native tongue is Ruby, not JavaScript. And
Mm-hmm.
so things like that. Definitely want to
Yeah,
keep
we
those in
had.
mind.
I think I had reached out to you even with one, because that's been my strategy with a lot of folks. They'll reach out if they say, "Hey, like we want to do this with scripts." I've just been very transparent and tell people honestly, like I will use this tool, and I looked it up. It's Jason Godson on GitHub. We'll link
Yep.
up the
Thank you,
tool
Jason.
and him. Yes, like stellar dude. He's a guy on staff at Shopify, and so but as far as that goes, I tell people like, hey, like I'll use this tool and implement, like we'll test it to make sure it works or whatever. But like honestly, this is not my jam. I have
Right.
a couple of folks that I would tap for this, and by a couple I mean Karl. And so I was like, hey, you can try the tool. If it doesn't work, reach back out and I'll connect you, kind of type thing. And
Right.
but more often than not, like people can get it done with something like that. Versus, yeah, now functions is a lot more complicated, and you actually kind of have to know what you're doing there.
Yeah. And I don't mean to scare people away. Like, it certainly isn't
I
terribly
mean to scare
complicated, but
people.
there, do
You should
you?
be terrified.
And I may be speaking out of turn now too, but because I haven't done a ton with it yet. But I think there's some really positive things too. Like, there's certainly limitations with the
Sure.
current script editor in terms of the data you can access. Like, you can't, I don't believe you can get line item properties I don't think you can do anything with meta fields, stuff like that. Whereas in functions, I'd have to double check. So again, a little alternate here. You might
Well, yeah,
have more
I say I
opportunities to
thought,
get kind of stuff.
you
So
know, with functions you can get all
right.
of that because there's some pretty neat stuff. I don't the some of
So
these additional APIs that they've come out with, cart transform, cart and checkout validation, very cool stuff that you can do there. So I was playing around with that stuff a little bit, but
yeah,
definitely I'm not um, read up enough or have enough time on the keys really to with it to be able to speak educated about it.
right. And honestly,
Carl's like, yeah,
between
right.
this has been my last statement about line item scripts. But between if you've got a background and you know how line item scripts are supposed to work, maybe you're even written some Ruby, you're trying to move them over to JavaScript. Between all the documentation that Shopify's put out, the improvements in JavaScript as a language, plus I hate to say it, but AI tools, ChatGPT, whatever you want, like the ability to sort of translate your thoughts out of Ruby because it's so readable in my opinion, and then use
It is very
tools to help you
readable,
figure
yeah.
out like what that would look like in JavaScript. It's not that bad. You just have to kind of get over the fact that there's a process, and once you do it, I think you'll see that it's doable. Just don't put it off for
Yeah.
forever.
Yeah. Well, and honestly, as a front end dev, like learning some of this stuff, Shopify does have some really good tutorials on
Mm-hmm.
how to walk through this. When I was researching initially doing the extensions only checkout extension, so it's an app, but like we're only caring about pushing out that checkout extension, and so it can live in that Plus client in this instance because it is custom. So Plus clients are the only ones that can access that, but it can just live in their checkout and stuff. And so
Yeah.
you get a download link, it just to that Plus organization and stuff like that, and then they can download it as an app, and then you can configure it as you need to. But like even going through that process, like once I figured that out, it was real easy to pump out a bunch of different checkout extensions for a handful of things before that would have been like a lot of hacking and working around some other JavaScript that was in checkout.liquid and trying to like make sure I wasn't like having problems there. So that part of it, yeah, once you get the process down, it is not nearly as bad. Again, like the pros and cons of it's a little bit more limited maybe than what we used to have access to, but there is like a much more predefined pathway for a lot of that. So it's much more easily repeatable and consistent. So some other things we'll link up in the notes aside from that. So I touched on this briefly, and I know we don't want to probably go too long here, kind of type thing, but I did take a look. So some of the links out from the partner dashboard, there are a couple of little. They've got their partner academy, so there are a couple of like just little educational pieces, classes that they have for customizing checkout and upgrading to checkout extensibility specifically. So I think that would be, well, like I said, we'll link all this stuff up, but a lot of it can actually be found within your partner dashboard. I think some of the tougher ones are finding some information on the tutorials are pretty easy to find. I had to bookmark the extensions only apps reference just because I could never find it after the first time I found it. I don't know why, but it's in there. It's just under app extensions in the dev docs. I'm
Yeah.
not sure why I could never find it again. So
And I will say we've got a ton of articles in Liquid Weekly over the last year or two
yeah,
dealing with all this stuff. So, liquidweekly.com, you can go check out all the archives are there. Use Google to search it, just cite liquidweekly.com and then type in your search term and you'll be able to find all that good stuff.
no. I did want to point out as well, if we're ready to transition to
Yeah, I think so.
another section, if you think we covered this a lot, we'll call it out in the changelog. But there were, or in the notes, I'm sorry, but in the changelog, there are actually a couple of checkout specific things that recently got updated.
Ooh.
So then you can now have, there's now support for header and footer customizations in checkout extensibility. So again, that's just with the being widely released for the branding stuff as well. That was a big piece to that. And then there was also where it now supports container styles. So there's a little bit
Hmm.
more styling capabilities there in the main and order summary areas of the checkout. And again, that's tied specifically to being able to deal with the branding API specifically in checkout extensions. So the the concept is just more control over stuff like border radius, color
Yeah.
schemes, spacing, yada 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 kind of type thing. So it's nice that they're doing some of these. I think the ability to do that kind of helps people out a little bit more with just, make it feel like their checkout.
Oh, for sure.
And that the last piece of the changelog is more so like there's some APIs in checkout that are being deprecated. So again, we're moving further and further away from, checkout.liquid and all these other things. And so we'll link that up, but they're in the future release, there's a couple of checkout APIs that will be deprecated in April, which by the time
Ooh.
this episode comes out, that will already have taken place. So heads up if you have not run into that yet.
Nice. Thanks for those calls. We always appreciate you doing that work of trolling through those change logs.
It's important for devs. Like some people, they're like, oh man, like
It is.
you should be on the changelog.
We may have to think about how to do this quicker so that we can actually get in front of people.
Yeah, maybe we could do little smaller hits or whatever,
Maybe.
little one-offs that would get released instead of making it like right in here, right? Sometimes it's a couple weeks away. That's why I checked the schedule. I was like, maybe this will be like kind of relevant by the time this comes out.
It's the burden of fame. It's okay. You want to move on to picks of the week?
Yeah, let's do it, man. Because I actually need a second. Honestly, I totally.
Oh, okay. Well, first of all, let me ask you this. I hate to do this in front of our listeners, but when do you think this is going to be live, this issue?
Oh, shoot. Let me pull that up.
Will it before April 8th? That's all I need to know.
Before April 8th?
Oh, no. Yeah.
Why before April 8th?
Well, I can't tell you until I know, because if it's before April 8th, then I got a great pick. And if it's after April 8th, I don't.
Yes, it will be out before April
8th. Okay, so my pick is April 8th is this gigantic solar eclipse, total solar eclipse here in North America. It's traversing from like Texas all the way up to New England, and it happens to be passing right through our neck of the woods, Taylor, kind of northwest Ohio. And I was looking at maps to try to get ready because I wasn't at all involved in the 2017 eclipse, which is like the last big North American one. But apparently, like, traffic was crazy. People were out. It took forever to get home for some folks. And so I've been trying to think ahead a little bit about, A, do I have the glasses? So make sure you get the glasses because you don't want to be staring at the sun. It ain't worth it. I hear it's bad for you. And then 2, and don't get them on Amazon. Only because, like, if you're ever gonna risk getting something commingled with a disreputable seller, that's not the time to do it. So
don't be risky.
No, don't be risky. You want legitimate eclipse glasses. I've been trying to plot where I want to go for this eclipse, and so there's maps out there, but they're all like giant images, and it's hard to zoom in. So I finally found an interactive one that lets you kind of dig in and sort of look in your area and where you want to be. So that's my pick of the week. There's a link. We'll link to it, but you can then examine exactly where the path of totality will be, and then look around for different routes you might want to take to get there, or parks to be at, so you can watch it. But don't miss out. I mean, it's a big deal. It's around 3:30 p.m. Eastern time here in Ohio on April 8th.
Right in this pathway here.
Yeah, maybe I'll come to your house.
The little. You are always welcome. It's the little strip through here, right? That's the idea. Oh, okay.
Yeah, so the blue line is the absolute center. I know, gotcha. I can tell. And then as long as you're in that path of totality between the red lines, for folks that can't see this, it'll make sense. This is like a like a stripe on this map. You'll still see totality, but it will last less. So I think if you're in the center, it's maybe a couple minutes of totality. If you're at the very edge, which is kind of where I'm at here in Columbus, it might be a couple seconds. So you have to debate how far in you want to get.
Just you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah, because
there it was.
You are right in the thick of it. You just look out your back window and you're set.
I am. You come on.
But
up. When is April? What day of the week is April 8th?
It's I don't know, but the edge of totality for me is literally like 3 blocks from my house, and so it's kind of like I mean, I could just stay here, but I'd hate to kick myself for not being willing to drive half an hour to get a better view. So
it's a Monday.
Yeah.
Okay, it's a Monday.
So there you go.
Come on up. We'll get an extra episode recorded and everything. Or not. We'll just hang out.
Yeah, be fun. Pop some popcorn, stare at the sun. Typical Monday.
Get everybody the glasses.
That's right. Did you come up with one yet?
That's awesome, man. Yeah,
I didn't make the eclipse, so you're welcome.
Well, So I've seen people referencing the eclipse. So I literally not looked at it because I don't know. I feel like, you get people talking about like, oh, this eclipse, this is the first time it's going to happen, or it's not going to happen for another 200 years. I'm like, I feel like people are
Right.
saying that about these random eclipses or like solar events all the time. Like, I feel like we just had something like this,
Wow.
right? But
You're so jaded.
this is a bigger deal, right? Yeah, I am jaded. I am like,
Yeah.
no, no pushback there at all. Um, the thing I'll pick here is the Raycast app. Have you used this at all ever or whatever?
No. But
So
it
this
sounds.
is just sounds
No, go ahead. Sounds good.
so it's just like this. I don't know. I'm not sure I'm gonna even like explain this properly here. And let me lift this up so that way I can send you the link and you can take a look. But it's just this. I'll drop it in the chat here. So it's just this app. It just has like a lot of these different little like productivity extensions, I guess, or whatever. So maybe used to be people would use stuff like Alfred and all these other things,
Mm.
kind of type thing. And so I
Yeah.
really do not use this half to the extent or whatever. I use it like as a better like product or app launcher or switch between tasks, search through clipboard history, do a couple little things. There's supposed to be some good stuff. I have yet to check it out though, for because I haven't relied on it quite yet, but it is really cool. I've found myself using it more and more. But there's supposed to be some two extensions in here, I think, for like the Shopify docs and stuff too, where you can get easier access to that, so, which is nice instead of having to like navigate right to the web page or whatever kind of type thing. So that could be something of interest that I actually haven't messed around with too much yet, but I have actually enjoyed using it. I've downloaded like Alfred and stuff before in the past and just never got used to using it. But I find myself using this more and more frequently all the time, so I need to actually take the time to learn the tool better. But I've had a really good experience with it so far. It's free, so open source. I think maybe there's some paid stuff with it. I don't know. I'm just doing the free stuff.
Yeah, was it? I remember hearing about this, and now I'm trying to remember if it was you or someone else. Must have been someone else, but I feel like these tools are amazing, and I just feel like I'm never gonna take advantage of them. But maybe if you show me some examples sometime, I'll be interested.
Yeah, yeah, we can. Like I said, I just use it like for like real quick stuff now, but I definitely
Okay,
know I'm underutilizing it, so maybe I'll be able to utilize it more in the future,
maybe. Okay, so you're
especially now
an
that I'm
iPhone guy,
picking.
right? No, you
Now I
finally
am,
got an
yeah.
iPhone.
Now I
Okay.
am, yeah.
So I feel like there's things about the iPhone that I need to learn too.
Hmm.
Speaking of making life easier, so is there a way, and there probably is, through shortcuts or something? I just want to push a button and have my iPhone automatically connect to this particular Bluetooth speaker in my house, and then bring up like the YouTube app so I can start playing music for my kids. Because right now I have to like go to the control panel, go to Bluetooth,
Hmm.
find the device I want, click on it, and meanwhile my 2-year-old is like trying to get at the phone, this and that, right? So is there an easy way to do that? It's got to be. So if
Oh,
you know it,
there has to be. Offhand, I don't, but yeah, I would think something in shortcuts. So the thing that really bothers me so far about the iPhone, probably the biggest thing that bothers me about the iPhone
it's
is
that sense of self satisfaction. Oh,
I don't have the ability to schedule messages like to send like in response to like text messages or so and stuff like that. So I know I'm supposed to rely on other people having their do not disturb hours set up or whatever, but I go to bed like relatively early. Like I try to get to bed before 10 o'clock, and I wake up right around 5 is when I try to be up. And so I'll have plenty of friends that message me pretty late, and I don't see it till the morning. But I don't want to message someone at 5 o'clock in the morning. But I'm also a very forgetful person, and so
yeah.
I'll like check messages and notifications at like 5:30. I don't want to send them a message at 5:30. Like I want to wait. And so iPhone that I know of
Man,
doesn't have anything natively to do that, and it's very frustrating for me because I
sounds
had
like you
that with
either
the
need to
Android.
get out of the habit of waking up so early or get out of the habit of checking your messages first thing. Just wait
I,
till
I don't know
noon like
when
that.
am I supposed to get to the gym if I can't go early? Like it just doesn't happen if I have to wait earlier. If I can't get up and
Yeah.
go while everyone else is sleeping, life gets in the way, and my willpower just goes.
You could be
I'll
like the
find
rest
something
of
else to
us
do.
and just don't do anything. Slowly decompose into a pile of sludge behind
Are
a
you logging
keyboard.
more miles on that desk treadmill now? Now that you've recovered?
I am, yeah. It's back there. Yeah, no, I still have trouble. Like, but that toe
Hmm.
still hurts For those that
That's
know,
rough.
I had an ingrown toenail. I think it's because of this desk treadmill. But yeah, usually between 5 to 7 miles a day. Just during meetings,
That's
it's nice
awesome.
to get 2 for 1 kind of with my time. So I don't think it's enough exercise. Like I think in terms of heart rate, like it's not like you're pounding because you got to be able to talk. So uh,
Well, that's so. I don't. Do you have something that tracks your heart rate? So there's this concept of like zone two and all this other stuff or whatever kind of type thing when it comes to
mhm.
like heart rate and training or whatever. But a lot of that, like a lot of walking stuff like that, usually it's like really really helpful for all that with your aerobic capacity and
Oh
stuff like
man,
that. You should sprinkle in a little bit of the higher aerobic
I
stuff.
should.
You know.
I feel like because for me, well, see, we're way off track now, but I feel like one of the biggest benefits of exercise for me is the mood lift, especially in the winter. Like I just get so down from the gray, and
Yes.
I don't think the walking helps with that as much as like faster cardio, but it's much easier and more accessible. So anyway,
I've been playing basketball on Saturday mornings. If you want to come all the way up here at 7, to get up here at 7 in the morning at the YMCA to play some basketball with my brother-in-laws.
no, I
They're
don't
much
because
better than I am. I'm terrible. So
I was playing one game in 1999 or was it 2000, and I sunk the game-winning shot, and I realized that was the peak
that's
for
the
me in
highlight. Yeah,
basketball,
that's it.
and so
It's
I've,
never
I've
gonna
never
get
played
better.
again because I was like, so sorry, I'm out. I retired.
That's all right. We'll figure
Anyway,
something else out.
yeah. Well, hey, for the one listener that stuck around for the end of this, we really appreciate you. Hope you've got some value out of listening to us talk about eclipses and basketball and gym stuff. But Taylor, it's weird being just the two of us, but it's nice to have a chance just to catch up and dive deep
Yeah,
and check out extensions. And yeah, it's good to see
good
you.
stuff, man. Good stuff. Good to see you too. Till next time.
Till next time, keep on keeping on. Don't stare at the sun. See ya.
Don't do it.